All right. Well, good evening, everybody, both near and far. Thank you for being here with us for our second coaching session, Partners in Education. My name is Karen Garman. I'm a fourth grade teacher here at the Lynch Buston Elementary Building. And for anybody viewing at home, I just want to remind you that the chat is going to be opened, and we have another teacher here, Stacy. She's monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, please type them into the chat. Also, if you're viewing from home, put yourself on mute until the end of the presentation when we open it up for questions. Thank you. Tonight, I'm going to talk about 3 strategies, and our agenda is There we go. 3 strategies. I call them the powerhouse strategies. I want to talk about the very first strategy that I always teach and why. It's the same strategy that I teach the kindergartners, 4th graders, 8th graders, and anybody beyond who's coming to me looking for help. And I give you a follow-on strategy to that, and what I call the golden strategy. It's a strategy that's very near and dear to my heart, and I think it's probably the most fun strategy. And I have a student here with me, Jace, and I bet he can even guess what my favorite strategy is. So just kind of keep that locked in there. And then I'll ask you to reveal for me. All right. The last time we were together, we talked about a good fit book. And we talked about that the students need to know their purpose. They need to be interested in the book that they're reading. They need to comprehend it, and they also have to know the words. There are so many strategies to fit the need for all of the different students that we have. So there's no systematic protocol for giving the strategies to students. You just have to find the strategy that meets the need for that particular book or for that particular student. So even though there are strategies that will help students understand the words that they're reading, I'm going to focus in on comprehension for our strategies today. We'll talk about some accuracy strategies in some future sessions. So today, my 3 strategies will focus in on just comprehension, which is understanding what it is that you're reading about. So the very first strategy that I start with, I'm going to tell you a little bit of story about myself. I think I shared this with you when we were going over good fit books. I wasn't a reader in elementary school, and nobody ever unlocked that passion for me in elementary school. And then I get to high school, and I had to read 5 books over the summertime and then come to school in September and take a test on them. And this was every year in high school. And I remember reading classics like The Scarlet Letter, Beowulf, Great Expectations, Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, I enjoyed, but I didn't have any strategies to help me through the reading process. So the very first strategy that I teach helps students do this. This is what I want for every student. I want them to be able to picture this story like it's a movie going on in their head. That's what I want for every student. This was me. Questions in my head. Not really understanding what I was reading. Maybe reading the words, but none of the story was making sense. So what I've learned lately is if you're not comprehending, this is you, then you're not really reading. So it is for that reason, the very first strategy that I teach children, whatever your age, kindergarten, 4th grade, 8th grade, and beyond, it's checking for understanding. And it sounds so simple, and it is. And I'm glad that I know this strategy now that I can share with students and with families. But it is so simple, and it helps the child realize if they know what the story is about. And it works like this. You simply stop at the end of the page or the paragraph or the chapter, and you ask yourself, who was this about and what is happening? And I can use this in a read aloud kindergarten students, and I can also use it at home with my students for reading chapter books. Here's what it might look like reading Chrysanthemum to a first grader or a kindergartner. This is just how Chrysanthemum, a favorite author of mine, Kevin Payne's, this is how the story starts. The day she was born was the happiest day in her parents' lives. She's perfect, said her mother. Absolutely, said her father. And she was. She was absolutely perfect. So this is where I would stop and I'd say, who is this about? Say, well, it's about this girl. And what is happening? Well, she's just being born. And her parents are saying that she's absolutely perfect. So with my child or with my student, I would turn to the page. I would continue reading. Her name must be everything she is, said her mother. Her name must be absolutely perfect, said her father. And it was. Chrysanthemum. Her parents named her Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum grew and grew. When she was old enough to appreciate it, Chrysanthemum loved it. When I would stop with my daughter or my kindergartner or my first grade, and I'd say, okay, let's check for understanding. Let's make sure we understand what this the story is about. So, number one, who is the story about? And then I, or the student, would say, well, it's not Chrysanthemum. Okay, and what is happening with Chrysanthemum? Well, she gets her name Chrysanthemum, and she's grown into a fish. Checking for understanding is a very simple strategy, and I wish I had it in high school. I think I would have checked for understanding on every page that I was reading, and the story would have made sense. I have one more to share with you, and it's a chapter book for anybody who has a son or a daughter at home that's reading chapter books. And this is from Roald Dahl's Matilda. And Matilda has been born to parents who don't really appreciate. So I'm picking up on page 12, and I just give that background knowledge so that you understand what a little bit of the plot is. And it begins. Daddy, she said, do you think you could buy me a book? A book, he said? What do you want a plain book for? For me, Daddy. What's wrong with the telly, for heaven's sake? We've got a lovely telly with a 12-inch screen, and now you're coming asking for a book? You're getting spoiled, my girl. Nearly every day Matilda was left alone in her house. Her brother, 5 years older than her, was school. Her father went to work, and her mother went out to play bingo. Mrs. Warnwood was hooked on bingo and played it 5 afternoons. On the afternoon of the day when her father was trying for a book, Matilda set out all by herself to walk to the public library in the village. She arrived, she introduced herself to the librarian, Mrs. Phelps, and she asked if she might sit a while and read a book. Mrs. Phelps liked in the back of the arrival of such a tiny little girl unaccompanied by her parents. Nevertheless, told her that she was very welcome. And I would stop at that page on just a simple page, and I would ask the student that I was reading with or my child, let's check for understanding. Let's ask ourselves who this was about. And the who is, it's about Matilda. And what is Matilda doing? She's asking her dad for a book. He says no. She takes it upon herself to go to the library. Checking for understanding. It's the first strategy, the biggest strategy that I stress with all of my students. And I think Jason will tell you that, yes, I talk about checking for understanding all the time. Sometimes I'll even give a little Post-it note to the students that I'm reading with. And on the Post-it note, it just simply has a great big check mark on it. And it says who and what on it. And I'll put this on their books to remind them to check for understanding, to make sure that they know what it is that they're reading. Because I can't stress enough, if we don't know what we're reading, then we're not really reading. So what do we do then if we don't understand? If we can't answer the who and the what? Jason, you know what we do? Yep, in order to comprehend, if we don't do it, we have to back and reread. Okay, so checking for understanding helps the students get the story in their mind. And when they don't do that, the follow-on strategy is to back up and reread. And as your takeaway for this evening, what I'm providing you is little cheat sheets, parent pipeline on checking for understanding, and a bookmark on checking for understanding. And on the flip side, it says back up and reread if we don't understand what it is that we're reading or that we're reading. Now, I said 3 strategies. They're the powerhouse strategies: checking for understanding and backing up and rereading. And you know what the golden one is that I absolutely love? I think it's probably, I put it right up there with checking for understanding. I'm pointing to my head for a reason. I'm putting you on the spot. Oops. Okay, then I'm going to help Jace out. It's my favorite. It's my golden strategy. Make a mental, make a mental image. Make a mental image is, I think, another powerhouse strategy, because when we're reading, we're making the story come alive in our heads. We are relying on the sensory details that the author is giving to us in the written word, and we're making a motion picture in our head. And this is the strategy that, for me, is the most fun and makes reading the most rich experience in the world. Now, the secret to making mental images is you have to slow down and you have to pay attention to the details provided by the author. So I brought in a couple of examples to show you where I might be making mental images and what it would sound like and what I would do in the classroom. So I'm pulling out Matilda again, and I gave you a little bit of a background that Matilda was born to parents who don't really appreciate her. This is how much they don't appreciate Matilda. So I'm picking up on page 10, where it says, let me give you a little bit of background knowledge. In the first 3 pages, the author starts talking to you about parents who are doting on their children, and then there's parents who don't dote on their children, and Matilda's parents are definitely in the non-doting category. Occasionally, one comes across parents who take the opposite line. They show no interest at all in their children. And these, of course, are far worse than the doting ones. Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood were 2 such parents. They had a son called Michael and a daughter called Matilda. And the parents looked upon Matilda in particular as nothing more than a scab. A scab is something you have to put up with until the time comes when you can pick it off and flip it away. Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood looked forward enormously to the time when they could pick their daughter off and flip her away, preferably into the next county, or even further than that. And that's about the time when I would stop, and if I was reading with a student or if I was reading it aloud in a classroom, I'd say, what do her parents think of her? And we would talk about scab forming on our arms and how it itches until we could just pick it off and flick it away. And then I had a discussion about how awful that is, that your parents feel that way about you. So making a mental image, the author uses sensory details, helps us connect, get a picture going in our mind. I brought in another example from another great author, Jane Yolen. She wrote Halloween. This is a lovely story where the author uses great descriptions to help us get that image in. It was late one winter night, long past my bedtime, when Pa and I went owling. There was no wind, trees stood still as giant statues, and the moon was so bright the sky seemed to shine. Somewhere behind us, a train whistle blew, long and low, a sad song. So even though there's pictures here in the picture book that I would certainly share with my child that was sitting next to me reading with me, if I was reading this in a classroom, I would ask my students, what words did the author leave for you to help you get that picture in your head as if you're right there? And some of the descriptors that stood out to me are stood like a statue. Trees are standing like a giant statue. And I can almost see these trees in my head as if they're stark still in the evening. And the other one was the moon was so bright, the sky seemed to shine. So much like a night tonight, we have a beautiful full moon out, and the moon is just shining so bright, it's almost as if it's sunshine, white. But I can picture in my head that beautiful night with the moon shining. And I have one more that I wanted to share with you, talking about the author's rich use of language to help us get this image going in our heads as if it's a movie. And this is from Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. And it's in chapter 3 where the author is describing the barn where Fern is with Charlotte and with Wilbur. The barn was very large. It was very old. It smelled of hay and it smelled of manure. It smelled of the perspiration of tired horses and the wonderful sweet breath of patient cows. It often had a sort of peaceful smell, as though nothing bad could happen ever again. It smelled of grain and of harness dressing and of axle grease and of rubber boots and of new rope. And whenever the cat was given a fresh head to eat, the barn would smell of fish. But mostly it smelled of hay, for there was always hay in the great loft up overhead. And there was always hay being pitched down to the cows and the horses. And it was right there that I would stop with my son or my daughter or my class if I was reading this out loud, and I would draw attention to the smell. How the author is trying to even help us not imagine ourselves in the barn, but also smell as if we're right there. So the secret to making mental images is if you slow down and savor the words and get a picture going in your head. The secret is slowing down and attention. Like smelled of manure. Those of us that live in Bradford County, we know what that smells like, and so we can if we're right. And it smelled of perspiration, tired horses. Well, I don't own a horse, but I sure know what sweat smells like. So I can get a really good mental image of to be in the barn. And again, I have to say the secret is slowing down, paying attention to the details, and letting that picture take over in the story. So this evening I presented 3 what I call powerhouse strategies. Checking for understanding, which is just a simple who and what are you reading. And you can do that on a page, on a paragraph, and a chapter. And if you don't understand what you're reading, you should always back up and reread it. Because if you're not understanding what you're really not. And then the last one, it's my favorite, it's make a mental image. And on the handouts that I provided for you this evening, I put mental image on bright sunshine yellow paper because I wanted it to be like the golden strategy in irritable box as well. The bookmarks that I'm letting you read this evening with to help remind you of the strategies are color coordinated. So I guess come to the end of my presentation, and I'd like to know if you have any questions. Do you have any questions, or if there are any questions in the chat room, Stacey? No? Okay. Well, I am going to be here for the next couple of minutes to answer any questions. If you want to type them into the chat or stick around and have a conversation with me. Before we leave tonight, I want to remind you that the next time we meet together for our 3rd session is December 5th at 6:30 p.m. And we're going to have the author Marlene Wright with us for some fun wintertime activities. Also, before you leave this evening, what is really helpful to me and to the planners and even those at home, we call it a glow and a grow. Please tell us what you liked about tonight's program. Leave it in the chat for us. Please tell us what we can do better for the next program. Please leave that in the chat. And also, let me know what I can do to help you on this journey with your children of reading at home. So I want to thank you for your participation. Thank you for your participation at home. And I'd like you to know that we think all of our Wildcat families are completely awesome. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you. Anything come through in the chat? No? Okay. All right. How you doing there, Julie?